are you going to do that? Are you crazy? You got to get, you got academics and you got other stuff. I said, I don't know. I just feel a need to do it.
Welcome to the Service to Syndication Podcast, where we interview the biggest and most successful real estate entrepreneurs, investors, capital raisers in the world who have worn the uniform of this great country, those who provide services to our men and women in uniform, and other service-oriented professionals to provide you with the tool sets, the mindsets, and the skill sets to help you conquer your dreams and goals in real estate and to use this wealth creation vehicle so you can live a more successful, happy, and fulfilled life of generosity and prosperity. If what you desire is time, lifestyle, and financial freedom, you've come to the right place. We will bring to you the best real estate entrepreneurs who will give you the insights, the knowledge, experience, skills, so you can go out and crush it in whatever real estate asset class you desire. So grab a pencil and paper, sit back, and enjoy the ride on the Service to Syndication Podcast.
Hello, my servicemen and women and other service providers. Welcome to another episode of the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast. I am your host, Cedric Marlow. Here on the Service to Syndication Real Estate Podcast, we interview the most successful real estate entrepreneurs, capital raisers in the world, where most have donned the uniforms of our great country. We aim to provide the tool sets, the mindsets, and skill sets for you to achieve your personal and business goals while using real estate as a wealth creation vehicle to help you live a more successful, happy, and fun-filled life. I am super excited today because I have with me Mr. Herman Bulls, who is a public-private partnership individual and advisor. Look, but before I properly introduce our exciting guest to you, I want to ask a favor of you. Please, if you get some value out of this interview, if you get some type of insight, mindset shift, if you learn a new skill, receive new information, receive inspiration or motivation to go out and make some progress in your life, please share this episode with some of your friends. Send it to someone you know who might be or could be interested in real estate. Share it on your social media, post it on your wall, or share it in your stories. Help us spread our message while you help others. And for all of you who shared this episode, I want to say thank you. Again, I know you're going to get a lot of value out of this interview. So like, subscribe, and leave a comment so you can be notified of future episodes. Again, everyone, I have with me Mr. Herman Bulls. He is Vice Chairman of JLL Americas and founder of the firm's nationally recognized Public Institutions Division, where he has spent over 35 years advising federal agencies, universities, and Fortune 500 companies on real estate strategies that drive efficiency and long-term value. A West Point graduate and Harvard MBA, Herman's career bridges military service, finance, and commercial real estate, having served nearly 12 years on active duty in the U.S. Army while retiring as a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves in 2008. In addition to his executive role at JLL, Herman co-founded Bulls Capital Partners, a multifamily finance firm, and leads Bulls Advisory Group. He serves on the boards of major public companies, including USAA, Host Hotels, Florence Energy, and Comfort Systems USA, and was named NACD's 2020 Public Company Director of the Year. Herman has also been recognized for a host of awards for years of public and private sector service, a recognized leader in public-private partnerships, diversity in boardrooms, and veteran mentorship, brings unmatched insight into the intersection of service, leadership, and real estate. All right, Herman. So who is Herman Bulls? So before you became this very successful person I see in front of me, give our listeners a little bit of your backstory, like where you grew up, how was your upbringing, and what in your past shifted your mindset into becoming the person you are today.
Well, Cedric, let me first of all thank you for having me on the show. And again, I want to also thank you for the passion that you have for not only helping our veterans, but helping our communities, because what you're doing, and if we only reach one person with this podcast, Cedric, you and I will have been successful.
Thank you.
Teach one, teach one, teach one, reach one. So that is
Absolutely.
so thank you for what you're doing. And I'd also understanding that you spent a total of 17 years, 8.5 years on active duty in the Navy. We won't talk about last year's Army Navy game, which happens in your beautiful city most of the time. Last year was an aberration that Navy came out on top. And I'm going to admit right now in public that Navy also is ahead in the series, I think, by 4 games. We're gonna get that down to 3 this year when we face off in Baltimore in December. So you ask about who is Herman Bulls. Herman Bulls is a father. He's a friend. He's a colleague. He's a grandfather. Just had my 5th grandchild over the weekend. Was out in Dallas for Savannah Iris Bulls, who was born. We'll talk about that later. She was named after my recently deceased wife. And I'm a friend. And with that, you ask, where did all of this come from? And I had to tell you, you said my success. To me, the story has not been finished. That's the way you have to get up. That's the first thing I want your listeners to know. We never coast. We enjoy life, but we never coast. So what I'm going to do next, I don't know. However, I think it all started down in Florence, Alabama. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and my upbringing was a little different. I tell my kids all the time that, mine was a little different than theirs. And what I mean by that, my dad, I never met. He was a laborer who worked at the Tennessee Valley Authority down in the Muscle Shoals, Florence area. And in addition to that, he and his brothers, they bought land. So what does that say? In the real estate genes, Cedric. So that started. And what he did, he would work his job. He worked like the evening shift, then come home and work on his farm. And one day in October 1955, we had the partials. And by the way, and you're in real estate, and farmland in the South, a lot of it used to be owned by African Americans. The number of farms owned by African Americans has decreased significantly. I'm happy to say that this farmland is still in our family. It's a total of about 140 acres, and we rent it out now, and all of the sisters and brothers, we all own it. There may be some capital events going on to, let some people who want to get out, but you know how real estate is. It's a illiquid asset until it's not. But in any event, he had the farm, and he was going from one partial to the other. As the crow flies, are probably, half a mile away, a mile, but you had to go out on the 4-lane highway and go over. And he had the tractor, he's on the 4-lane highway, and an 18-wheeler truck ran into his tractor and killed him. So that happened in October of 55. I was born in February 1956. So my mother at the time was in another part of the county picking cotton, because, everybody has to work to keep these families going. And so there she was at the time, had not finished high school, 6 kids, pregnant with a 7th. And her husband and life partner just, unfortunately killed. And when I think I have a bad day, there are 2 things I think about. That and what my mother must have gone through. And the second thing is being in Ranger School for the Army. So those are 2 things that come to my mind. So my mother is a lot of this inspiration. Of those 7 kids, all 7 went to college, 6 graduated with a total of 11 degrees. My mother worked 3 jobs. She was a cook at a restaurant. She was a domestic cleaning people's houses. And I used to go with her sometime, and I see these beautiful homes. I said, oh my gosh, what would it be like to live in something like that? And then she was also a revenue collector for Atlanta Life Insurance Company, where she went around and picking, people would pay a quarter, a nickel, a dime a week, and she would drive around and pick it up. And I actually remember being in the car when she would do that. Then she went back to school, got her GED, working full time. Then she drove, it would probably be about 70 miles round trip to John C. Calhoun Junior College, and became a licensed practical nurse. And from that, we moved from the farm. Some of the kids had already been to college, and we moved to Florence, Alabama when I was in the 7th grade. And I'm this lanky little black kid in the school. This is after desegregation. And fortunately, the basketball coach gave me a tryout, even though he'd already picked the team. And he allowed me to actually try out for the team. And I made the basketball team. I didn't start. However, I made the team. And that was a social. You remember being in junior high school, the cool kids, so to speak. So I was at the cool kid table. And I was a good student. However, I often tell the story that we had a grade that you were rated on deportment. That means how you got along with people, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I would get C's in deportment, Cedric. And as I say, it has served me well. And I got to C's because I talked a lot. And however, very good grades. And one other thing that's real important to remember for me is during that time, I went out for the Pee Wee football team and I wanted to be the quarterback. And again, now we're probably in 68, 69, 68, 69. And I remember the coach saying, "You're not a quarterback, you're a guard." And that was fine. Then when I finished and went to Coffee High School for the night freshman team, I said, "Well, I'm going to go out for quarterback." And I went out for quarterback, and I was the starting quarterback for the freshman team and went on for my senior year. I led 3 years of varsity football, became starting quarterback my senior year. I was also president of the student council. You have to understand this school was 16% Black.
Wow.
So you learn about coalitions. And National Honor Society, played four sports, baseball for 2 years. I had the record in the high jump. I had a radio show. So it was really a magical experience. And you finish all of that and you say, wow, what are you going to do next? Now, I'm really swimming in a small pond, so to speak, and I didn't realize it at the time. However, I was looking for something that was going to be challenging and I thought would also provide something for the future. So I was recruited quite a bit, more academically probably than athletically, but even though I was recruited for football, and the best opportunity I had for a school that people would know about was probably Vanderbilt. And they were putting something together to give me a part athletic, part academic. However, all of the service academies recruited me. I fit the profile. Very good student, good athlete, and leadership, right? That's what they're looking for. And that worked for, and I saw the process of West Point, all the academies recruiting me, but West Point, they would send a letter every week talking about what former Army football players were doing now. And they were CEOs of companies, they were partners in law firms, they were just this great thing. And I said, my gosh, this is really neat. And this is what really scared me, Cedric, and any of your young listeners out there have to know this. When I went through that year, particularly my senior year in high school, everybody was telling me how great I was going to be. Right. As a 17-year-old that hasn't really seen a lot of the world, that was scary, to be honest with you. And part of the reason that I chose West Point was that I think it's something I'm willing to work hard. And if I work hard, I think it'll be good for me. So went to West Point, played football for 2 years, and my abilities or lack thereof caught up with me. However, when you get lemon, you make lemonade. And I told you, I had a radio show in high school, and they actually used that to help recruit me to West Point. We got a radio station, and I got involved in the radio station. And my last 2 years there, instead of playing football, I was the voice of Army sports. I did play-by-play for football and basketball. And our basketball coach, I'm looking at a picture over here of Coach K. He was the coach at West Point, and he's a personal friend to this day. Matter of fact, I'm on the board down at Duke of the Coach K Center of Leadership and Ethics.
Okay.
We talked about, great things about leadership, which we're going to talk about in a little while. And that was the career that got me to West Point. And then I served a time in the Army, as you said, and got out of active duty after a career in, I met my wife in the Army, who I mentioned earlier. She passed away from cancer 4 years ago, a little over 4 years ago. But 3 beautiful kids. We traveled around, and 2 of my boys, by the way, went to West Point as well. One is in Chicago. He just retired after 20 years. Airborne Ranger, spent 3 combat tours. Very proud of all of them. He gave the ultimate in terms of his sacrifice for his family. 1 tour in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, company commander, and you understand that, in combat. And he is now working for Microsoft. My second son, Nathaniel, is down in Florida. And I don't know why all my guys are in sales. I don't know why that, but he's in sales for a major recycling company down there. And then Jonathan, my youngest son, he also went to West Point. And he actually played football for 4 years and played in a bowl game and played at Yankee Stadium and played against Notre Dame. All of those things, I must admit, that I would have loved to have done myself. However, when you can do it, not vicariously to the point that it was not healthy, but it was great to experience that with him. And our family is so close. We do everything together. To this day, tradition we started many, many years ago. The Army-Navy game is like a mini homecoming for us every year.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing that you guys still, like you said, you created that tradition for that Army-Navy game. That's awesome. That's awesome. You said you were recruited by all of the service academies. I'm not going to hold it against you that you became, you didn't go to the midshipman, but just wanted to bring that up.
I tell you right now, I would be a lot more rested because I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and Annapolis is only 45 minutes from here. And when the two kids were at West Point, that's a 5-hour drive. And I'm actually vice chair of the board at West Point now, so I'm up there quite a bit. And
Wow.
West Point's not easy to get to. It's
Yeah.
not easy to get to. So my life would be a little more convenient, I say, if I had been a midshipman. However, in all seriousness, I would encourage any of you out there, if you're young, to look at those opportunities. If you're a parent, it's okay to let your kids explore it. And Cedric, as you know, the military is not for everyone. However, those who serve do something for all of us, and they do something for our nation. And for me, in terms of the ability, little black skinny kid from Alabama, having the opportunity. And let me tell you, one of the things, and I want to mention these things, not so much to be boastful, however, to show people what can happen. 2 years ago, I was inducted into the Alabama Business Hall of Fame.
Wow.
And the fourth Black person to get that honor, Booker T. Washington, Alexis Herman, among those in front of me. Mm-hmm. And as I stepped on that stage to get that award, and thinking back to George Wallace sitting on the steps of the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa saying that, Black kids are not going to come here. My childhood memories of the KKK on the main street, having to go up to the balcony to go to the movie. You're a little young to know these things. Having to see signs that say, whites only, Negroes for water fountains and bathrooms, and going to the back of the restaurant to get your food. I was 5-6 years old, but these memories are embedded in my mind. And going there and being recognized by my state for something I did even outside of the state, but the way they have the criteria is people who have brought, prestige to the state of Alabama. And that was just something that, it would have been great if my parents could have been there to have witnessed that. Also, my former wife, it would have been great. Not former, I guess she's still my wife, but my deceased wife. And fortunately, all my kids were there. All my grandkids were there. All my brothers and sisters were there. And it was I think it was just, again, to us, family is so important to us. And that's something that the nucleus of that, I think, goes back to my mom, because you can imagine her that day. And I don't know if your roots are in the South, Cedric, but in the South, it really was a village. And they were like, her name was Lucibel. Lucibel, I'll take one. And you know what she said? No, I'm keeping my family together. And she worked those 3 jobs to do it. And let me tell you, she was a disciplinarian too. Okay. And that's what it took to get it done. And one of my greatest joys right now is watching my sons become parents, and them coming up and talking to me and saying, now I get it. I know why you made us go to extra counseling. I know why you didn't let us get the starter jacket every time we wanted it. I know why you didn't give us a cell phone time they came out. I know why you didn't buy us a car so we would have this feeling of entitlement, et cetera, et cetera. Right. I'm going to tell you, Cedric, we do a lot of things in this world. I feel that if each person takes responsibility for that other human being that they bring in the world, this world will continue to be a better place. And that's one of the things, again, as I said at the beginning, the story's not over yet. However, that part of it at probably halftime, maybe a little past halftime, relative to the family, I'm really proud. And by the way, don't tell my boys that I'm proud of them. Okay, we're not going to let them know.
There you go. We won't tell them that. And we won't tell them about this interview. How about that? So, Herman, your real estate career spans over 3 decades, but it began after 12 years of military service. How did your time in the Army, if at all, affect your leadership style and your approach to commercial real estate?
We know you're going to like this episode, so please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you can be notified when the next episode drops.
I get asked that question a lot. What happened, I was in the Army. I was fortunate enough to be selected by the Army to go to Harvard Business School. And at Harvard Business School, he was in student government. There's a trend here of leadership. And that's an interesting story in itself. We had probably 35 Blacks were in the class. And I'm coming from the Army. I just come from Korea and then stopped by Indianapolis for a while, where my first son was born, just before my wife and I started grad school, because she was in the Army and she was at Tufts University and I was at Harvard, both in the Boston area. And now I know it. And by the way, two of my sons went to Duke and they had heard how this process works, so to speak. I didn't know anything about it. So I show up at Harvard and then they start talking about the first week, we're going to select leaders for each of the sections. There are 9 sections of approximately, 90 people, maybe some up to 95. And you need a structure, right, to be able to get things done. You interact with the administration, et cetera. And one of the positions is section president. And I had been president of my student council in high school. I had been involved in student government at West Point. And I went home, told my wife, and we've got a baby and we're both in grad school. I said, I think I'm going to run for this section thing. She said, why are you going to do that? Are you crazy? You got to get, you got academics and you got all this stuff. I said, I don't know. I just feel a need to do it. I mean, not that I'm a natural leader, but I'm attracted naturally to leadership opportunities. And I had no idea that most of the kids, generally not from a background like yours and mine, they knew about the process, because the companies, when they come to recruit, the major investment banking firms, consulting firms, et cetera, they know at Harvard Business School, they're getting a pretty refined set of people who's gone through quite a screening process. Yes. However, they're looking for what? The best of the best.
Yeah.
And one of the proxies that they use for that is, who do these individuals pick as their leaders? And I didn't know this at the time. And I ran for section president. And remember, I'm coming from the military. My last job, I had 110 people working for me. Getting up in front of a crowd and talking was second nature. And that's part of the leadership, how you present yourself and vision. We'll talk about some of those in a little while. However, I decided to do it. And I was the third person to go. The first person got up and they basically, you're in a well, the wells where the classes are held. And this person's just sitting there basically looking down, reading. No eye contact with the audience whatsoever. The second person did somewhat better, but still stood in one place. And I was third. I got up. It was like I was talking to the troops, right? I'm in the well. I get up. I had a 3x5 card with about 5 things on it that just were, prompts, so to speak. And I'm walking around the room in that well like I own it, which I felt that I did. Okay. And I'm getting eye contact, all those things they teach us in the military, right? How to be a leader, how to infuse confidence, et cetera, et cetera. When I finished, and this is just phenomenal, the section stood up and clapped.
Wow.
Okay. And then 2 other people had to go. And you got to understand this. We probably only known each other 2 weeks, 5 people running. And I was selected on the first ballot. And part of that was luck, but I think part of that is what we're talking about, is that leadership and presence and the ability to communicate. And I often talk about 5 characteristics. And we're going to get to your question about real estate here, but I got some things I want to get in. 5 characteristics that are critical to success, no matter if you're doing real estate, you're an astronomer, or you're a zoologist. And those come down to some of the things that we've touched on already. The first one is interpersonal skills. And when I think about interpersonal skills, Cedric, it's certainly not just that ability to glad handle and touch people on the back. And one of the things you got to understand, the majority of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are introverts. They're not extroverts. So what I mean by interpersonal skills is the ability to relate to people.
Yes.
And that happens by being a lifelong learner, being curious, and having emotional IQ.
Okay.
So that comes from you and me and our past experience going into a party and being able to talk to the private, or the swingsman, or whatever your E1 is, as well as to the admiral, the general.
Yes.
Be able to do that, you need to be aware of what's going on in the world. So one of the things I do when I go into events now, I always talk to the service staff. And the reason I do, my mom used to be one of those people.
Yes.
Okay. And I ask them, how is your family? Do you have a family? The actual listeners to do this sometimes. Those are the invisible people. We're busy getting our drinks and eating our food and networking and doing all this stuff. Well, my mom was one of those people. And if somebody said something to her that made her day better, I'm certain that made my day better. And I'm very, very, very aware of that. So that interpersonal skills are important. Your communication skills, and using that example at Harvard, that ability to communicate, which comes with some subcomponents. Okay. Speaking, very, very important. Another one is listening. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. And my mom used to tell me this, use them in that proportion sometime. Your writing skills are important. And also your body language, that expression, that smile, All of that's welcoming to people. Communication important. Your analytical skills are critical. Those analytical skills come in both quantitative, that we can do the math. However, all your listeners should know, the higher you get in an organization, the less likely you are to ever use a spreadsheet. You're going to look at the results from the spreadsheet.
Right.
So that analytics is important there. However, there's also qualitative analytical skills. How do you decide who to hire? How do you decide how to spend your day and what's a priority? That's analytics. And it's not what most people think of as quantitative. The next one is so important, and that's leadership. And I define leadership very succinctly as the ability to influence a group to accomplish a common goal. And to be a leader, you have to have a vision, and you have to have the ability to inspire. And you do not have to be in charge to be the leader. You can lead from the rear, you can lead from the middle, and obviously when you are in charge, you're leading from the front. And leadership isn't all about having the answer every time. Leadership is about developing others to get the answer. That's what great leaders do. And then we think about one that sometimes military people, even though they perhaps operate in one of the most dangerous professions in the world, entrepreneurship or risk-taking. And I think that's what you're trying to get your listeners to get into the idea, particularly with the opportunity to do what you and I have done in real estate. Yes. And we understand the risk-taking of going to war, going to battle, but the risk-taking where your reputation is at risk, where your finances are at risk, and you can take the road that's easy. And I tell people, you don't just take risk. They're always mitigating factors. I'm airborne, which means I jumped out of that perfectly good airplane that you fly in all the time. However, they're mitigating risks to that. And then I have what? A parachute. And in the military, we have what? I have a reserve parachute. Right. The first one doesn't go. So it's not about just taking risk and being wholehearted about it. It's also about mitigating those risks, but being able to recognize what they are, and then doing something is risky. You're generally doing something that's uncomfortable. Okay. And then the last part of that, Cedric, is passion, having passion for what you do. If you can tie a bow around it and put the passion around all those other characteristics, you're going to be successful no matter what you do. So Harvard, I'm in student government. They say, hey, we're only going to have one section of real estate. And these kids, majority of them Caucasian, they go nuts. And this was back in the days when depreciation rules were different and every dentist and doctor had real estate because it was just so advantageous from a tax purpose. Right. And these people had no intention of going into real estate full time, but they knew from their conversations at the breakfast table and dinner table, hey, this is what you do relative to real estate and the things that you're teaching people. And I worked with the administration. I was part of the student government that helped. We negotiated and they did get a second section. And I'm one of these guys, I said, wow, where there's smoke, there's been fire or will be fire. And I signed up for that real estate course. I don't want to say it changed my life, but it gave me insight in the way Harvard teaches in a case method. It was development, it was investment management, and you learned all these things. And I was like, wow, this is really neat. And that's where I got the bug for real estate.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I love it. So just real quick, you founded JLL's Public Institutions Division, helping governments and nonprofits manage real estate more strategically. What are some of the biggest challenges public entities face when it comes to real estate, and how do you help solve them?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that it is not a core competency, meaning that it is something that not that they do on the side. They have professionals that are very many cases qualified to do it. However, it is not a priority. If you think about it, real estate is generally, for any organization, it's generally a third cost factor. Your people are first, technology generally second, then your real estate is third. However, the real estate creates what? A place for people to live, play, work, and learn. Absolutely. And creating that environment where you get what? Interaction. Interaction happens. Innovation results from interaction. So that is one. The second thing, and one of the things we really worked on, was military housing privatization. And in that instance, the government did not have the capital needed to, as you know, you need reinvestment in real estate to keep it going. And if you don't reinvest in it, like a house, the longer you wait to fix something, the more it's going to cost you in the long term. And just with competing priorities, and commanders were focused on their first priority is what? The warfighting mission. And as a result of that, the infrastructure was given, I'll say, a back seat and wasn't given the attention it needed. And it had gotten to a point, particularly in the military housing, that they had to do something, and they did not have all the capital. Because in the government, with government budgeting, if I'm going to fix or build this building, I've got to appropriate the money all in one budget cycle. And even though we're going to build it over 3 years or 4 years, and we're going to use it over 40 years, I've got to essentially, for budget purposes, pay for it in year zero, really, before it's even built. And there was no way they were going to be, in this instance, able to do what they need to do, because you got what with military housing? You got retention issues. You got just good policy issues, that these are people that are willing to put their life on the line, and they should have the opportunity to live in safe, comfortable housing, not Taj Mahals, but good housing. So as a result of that, we helped, and I was very instrumental in doing these first deals because of my relationship to the military, right? Just so happened at this time, my classmate from West Point, who was a friend, and we certainly didn't talk about the deal, but he was Secretary of the Army. And so you go to meetings, and it's not what you do, it's what people think you do. And people would say, "Oh, Herman, I heard that the secretary was in your wedding." He wasn't. So the challenges are lack of capital. Then the other thing, Cedric, which you know so well, is real estate. It takes expertise. And when you've got agencies, entities, and even corporations that it's not their core competency, they're not going to invest in the technology. They're not going to have best practices. They're not going to have the economies of scale. We buy light bulbs for over 6 billion square feet of space around the world at JLL. So we get a pretty good deal on light bulbs. And it's all about punching a computer saying, "Okay, GE, ship this one here." But we're a big purchaser, so what do we get? We get economies of scale in purchasing, and we're able to pass that on. So those are some of the challenges.
Okay. Man, I mean, we could talk for ages because we haven't even scratched the surface of your resume, but there's a time crunch. But Herman, before I let you go, I have one last question. What does legacy mean to you? And how do you hope your work has shaped the industry and people around you?
Well, legacy to me, it really starts with my family. It really starts first with my family. So having the ability for my kids, who are very productive contributors to society, and now my grandkids on that same path, means a lot to me. Okay, so that comes first. Then let's get into the selfish part, the egotistical part of it. Feels good to be recognized for selfless leadership, okay? And one of the things I talk about is networking versus connecting. And this is one thing I want to be known for. Networking is phenomenal. Networking is what we all need, to the extent we need a network. However, networking in most people's mind, whether they realize it or not, is very transactional.
Yes.
I'm going to do this for you, Cedric, because you're going to do this for me, and we're going to be good for each other. That is good. There's nothing bad about that. However, let me tell you one of my secrets that I came up with after analyzing, and how is this little skinny kid in the 16% Black school, at the time Hispanics were probably 1%, if even that. How did he become president of student council in the heart of the South during the civil rights movement? And what I decided is because I do something called connecting with people. And this is a legacy that I want to leave. And when you connect with someone, you're willing to do something with or for them without regard as to what you will receive in return. Think about that. With or for them without regard as what you're going to receive in return.
Yes.
And if you do that authentically, you do that consistently, okay, great things are going to happen. If you do that, you end up with a relationship. Relationships are deep. Relationships are enduring. And that's what I try to do in my business development role with my clients. And it's not just about the business. It's about the relationship. Because any transaction, any relationship, there are going to be hiccups, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend, work colleague, doesn't matter. The issue is, how do you resolve those? And if you have a deep relationship, it's great. And one other thing on that one real quickly, sort of like an acorn. If I knew which person to establish that relationship beforehand, that would be great, wouldn't it? You never know. So you got to treat each of them with care. And again, the genuine and authentic approach to that is critical to it.
Yeah. Wholeheartedly agree. And, with this platform, that's one thing that I've been able to do is been able to connect people without any regard for anything in return. Real quick, and then we'll end this. I actually contacted someone that put out asking for someone who lived in Cincinnati. Does anyone know? And I said, yeah, me and this guy, we were going to be business partners. I was like, yeah, I know a gentleman that lives there. Out of that relationship, of that connection, the guy who was going to be my friend ended up with 85 units, became a general partner with 85 units, and literally did nothing but just needed to lead the acquisition team. That was it, totally. And I didn't want anything in return from it. Never expected anything. So what those words you said are wholeheartedly true. Well, Herman, it's been a blast having you as our guest today. As we close out, please tell our listeners where we can learn more about you, get in touch with you, and learn about all the fabulous things you have going on right now.
Oh, well, I'm on, believe it or not, Twitter. I'm on Instagram. My kids told me old people are on Facebook. So I have an Instagram account. I think it's at Herman Bulls. And I'm on Facebook and as well as LinkedIn. Herman.bulls@jll.com. That'll get it.
Awesome, Herman. Again, I want to thank you for your time today. And all the wisdom you have provided to my listeners is greatly appreciated. And I want to thank you, our fans, for tuning into another Service to Syndication podcast, where we want to add value to you in your investing business. Please tune into our next episode, where we will interview another fantastic investing professional. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Service to Syndication Podcast. We want you to know that we love and appreciate your support, and we are grateful about being a part of your journey to becoming a successful real estate entrepreneur. Please share this episode with a friend who you think will get a lot out of what you just heard. Send it to someone who you know is interested in real estate and dreams of having it all and being the best they can be in all areas of life. And if this was really valuable, share it on your social media stories and timelines. Thank you for watching and listening. Now go be great.